5 interesting facts about the peak of Everest, the highest in the world. If you name the highest point on Earth, the peak of Everest is the answer. Mount Everest has a peak that marks the border between Nepal and Tibet, but in particular it turns out that the peak of Everest is part of mainland Tibet. As the highest mountain in the world, it is not surprising that many climbers from various countries are curious to conquer the highest peak on Earth. You can get to know the peak of Everest better with the following facts. 1. History of the discovery of Mount Everest. The existence of Mount Everest has indeed succeeded in attracting the attention of many people to explore it further. It is indeed not an easy thing to conquer this mountain, which is also the highest point on Earth, so there is its own history to mark it. Reported by UMT, it turns out that the existence of Mount Everest was still unknown to mankind in the western region until 1852. Only then did surveyors discover the existence of this mountain at a time when the British government was mapping India. The reason is, India at that time was still part of the British Empire. 2. Height of the peak of Everest. Many climbers from around the world seem interested in exploring the Everest region because it has its own charm. Not only is it the highest point on Earth, the peak of Everest also offers a lot of beauty in itself. Mount Everest apparently touched 8,839.8 meters, when it was first surveyed in 1852, which means the peak was at that height. It's no surprise to call the peak of Everest the highest point on Earth. But then Mount Everest's height rose 9 meters since it was first measured in 1952. According to surveys conducted by Nepal and China, they produced two different height figures, one 4 meters lower than the other because it did not take into account permanent snow on the peak. Then, the two countries agreed that Mount Everest has a height of 8,848.86 m, which was measured in 2020. This figure includes the snow peak. When compared to when it was first measured in 1852, Mount Everest is 9 meters higher. 3. There have been thousands of climbers who have succeeded in reaching the peak of Everest. As the highest point on Earth, it seems natural that many people are interested in exploring the area. The climbing process certainly takes a long time and is full of challenges because you have to face many difficulties. Reported by High Adventure Expeditions, it was recorded that in January 2023 there were 6,338 climbers from various countries who had successfully climbed Mount Everest and reached its peak. In fact, Kami Rita Sherpa from Nepal has succeeded in reaching the summit of Everest 26 times. 4. Average peak temperature of Everest. Climbing Mount Everest cannot be done by just anyone because the climbing process is very risky and dangerous. In fact, even professionals can experience problems when climbing Mount Everest due to geographical conditions, air pressure, and extreme temperatures. Reported by Base Camp Trek Nepal, the average temperature at the top of Everest can reach -36 degrees Celsius. In fact, in bad weather conditions, the temperature can drop freely to -60 degrees Celsius, and this is what people have to face when going on expeditions there. 5. Average duration of climbing to the top of Everest. Many climbers may be interested in exploring the summit of Everest, but of course they need to know the average duration of the climb. It turns out that the duration of the climb to the top of Everest takes quite a long time. Reported by the Explorer's Passage, it takes 19 days round trip to and from Everest Base Camp. In addition, from Everest Base Camp to the top of the mountain takes up to 40 days. This long duration is certainly not without reason because the body needs to adjust to the extreme altitude and there is only a third of the amount of oxygen at the peak. This is what makes many climbers unable to climb quickly, so the path will be very slow. Indeed, the peak of Everest always has its own charm for many climbers to explore. Apart from that, there is a special satisfaction for climbers if they succeed in conquering the highest point on Earth.